As someone who teaches dialogue facilitation, one of the most common questions I get is how do I respond to conflict and pushback in a group? While I do teach a 4-step framework to address pushback when it happens in the moment, the real preparation for handling pushback begins long before it ever occurs. One of the best strategies I've found to navigate disagreement is to equip the group with tools early on to help them navigate upcoming discomfort in their learning journey. And for me, teaching participants about cognitive dissonance theory and all of the behaviors that go along with that has proven to be the most effective way to do that. I first got the idea to teach about cognitive dissonance a few years ago after reading this article by Paul Gorski. I really encourage you to read the whole thing if you're interested, but in it, he explains that explicitly teaching about cognitive dissonance has been the most effective and influential practice of his career as a social justice educator. So naturally, this piqued my interest, and I started experimenting with all sorts of ways to incorporate this into my curriculum. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through my favorite activity to introduce cognitive dissonance theory. I've prepared a more comprehensive downloadable PDF that contains all of the information that you'll need if you want to facilitate this activity. And also, if you're interested in building on this concept with activities that are specifically designed to help students unpack oppressive norms and dominant narratives, make sure to check out my upcoming course where we will be delving into this topic in much more depth. So first, I like to introduce cognitive dissonance with a short visualization. So I tell the participants that they can relax in their chair and I read them a little story. Imagine you take your dog on daily walks. Like any responsible dog owner, you carry plastic bags and always clean up after your dog. But one day, halfway through the walk, you realize you forgot the bags. Unfortunately, your dog chooses that moment to do their business. You take a quick look up and down the street, and you see that no one's around. So you call your dog and hustle away quickly. Once you're home though, you begin to feel guilty. Deep down, you know it's not right to leave your dog's mess on the street. And plus, you pride yourself on being a good neighbor who would never do something like that. So that's the scenario I like to use. It's purposefully quite simple and apolitical because I want it to be accessible to the widest number of people. But if for any reason you feel that this scenario would not be accessible to the students that you have in front of you, pick a different scenario. You can sub it out very easily. So it's important to underline that this guilt, or we can refer to it more broadly as psychological tension or pain, is the result of dissonance. It's a result of misalignment between your behavior and a belief that you have about yourself. So here I like to pause for a moment and ask students to reflect on what that misalignment feels like in their body. How can we tell when our psychological discomfort is linked to cognitive dissonance? And to protect us from this icky feeling of discomfort or threat, our brain actually has a lot of different techniques to help reduce our perception of this dissonance. So now I introduce the 8 major dissonance reduction techniques, and then we walk through what they might look like in this scenario. So to reduce the dissonance, an action that we might take is simply to go back and collect the dog poop. And then the other ones involve changing our beliefs. So there's justification. You could think, I'm in a hurry and I'm already totally overwhelmed by my to-do list. There's denial. You could think, I don't even really think there was much there. Or you could reason with yourself that dog poop is biodegradable anyway. There's also trivialization, so you could think, it's not that big of a deal. People do this all the time. There's blame. So something like, it's really ridiculous they don't have plastic bag dispensers on the street. You could instead add a good feeling thought. I'm already a good neighbor because I pay high taxes for street cleaners. Then there's distraction, so you could just tune it out, maybe start scrolling on your phone. And then finally, disengagement. So this could look like you stop walking your dog altogether, or you get your dog a litter box. Basically, you don't want to have to deal with this feeling of discomfort ever again. So that's an overview of the 8 dissonance reduction techniques. If you download the PDF, you'll see that there are a lot more examples on there that you can use to review this concept with your students. And before the next part, I also suggest sharing vulnerably an example of cognitive dissonance that you struggle with in your personal life, just because it helps the students connect to you and you're about to ask them to go away and do that themselves. So I like to always model that first. I then split up the students in small groups and give them this handout to do what we just did all together. Only now they have to discuss amongst themselves and come up with 5 other examples of cognitive dissonance that they have personally struggled with. I ask them to try and diversify the examples here, to try to come up with some unique examples that other groups might not readily think about, and to have a mix of some low-level and some higher-level stakes examples. After I've given them about 5 to 10 minutes to complete this task, I ask the groups to present to us their 1 or 2 best examples of cognitive dissonance and to report out to us from their discussion the 1 or 2 points that were most interesting. I usually really enjoy this discussion, and the group does as well, because there's something that's really humbling and connecting about sharing these internal contradictions that we struggle with, because usually we do so very quietly and we don't really talk about it with each other. So it allows us to kind of like bond and to create a new level of vulnerability and trust in the group. And finally, you can lead a debrief with some of these questions, which are also listed on the PDF. The overall purpose of this debrief is to help participants decide how they want to use this information to enhance our dialogue. So how will we individually and collectively navigate our cognitive dissonance when it arises so that we can remain curious, critical thinkers and not fall prey to various biases? Actually, biases is also something I explicitly teach about, but that's not the topic of this video, so do let me know in the comments if that's a video you'd like to see in the future. Before ending this video, I want to highlight that with this activity, repetition is key. If you introduce cognitive dissonance on the first day and then never mention it again, it probably won't make any sort of lasting impact on your learning space. So it's important to bring it up frequently. I also use this table again and again in order to collectively brainstorm with the students what our reactions might be when a marginalized or atypical perspective enters the room. I really like this because it allows us to study some of the knee-jerk responses that people might have in response to underrepresented perspectives, but we're doing it in a way that is depersonalized, so people are more likely to question their own biases without getting defensive. And as a facilitator of social justice education, I build on this activity in later classes to highlight the political aspects of how we experience cognitive dissonance, because cognitive dissonance, just like other affects and emotions, is shaped by ideology. Culture and socialization dictate what we think is acceptable and true, and it feeds us ready-made stories to minimize the cognitive dissonance we might feel when we see things in society that are inconsistent or unfair. And I'll say again that if this is a point that you're interested in, it's one that we're going to very practically explore in my online course. So the link for that is in the description box. So that's it for this video. I wanted to give you all a little primer of how I use cognitive dissonance in my practice because it's been so helpful. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!